One other optional thing that you might want to add to your project is just some comments that identify what the project is and add some project details. I also like to include a master color guide and a master typography guide, and this is something that I like to have appearing at the top of my page. So I'm going to actually include this in the table of contents. I'll just make one more additional table of content setting. So this will actually be my first one, and I'll just call it project details and color and typography info. I'll reorganize my numbers here, and then I just want to make sure that these numbers all correspond. So my global styles now becomes 3. I'll copy one of these guys right here. My CSS reset is going to become 2, and then right underneath the table of contents we'll just add our information that is going to now be number 1, which is going to include our project details. Okay, now that I have that information identified, I'm going to add just some basic information. So I'll start by having some project details. And this, again, can be whatever you want it to be, but in the project details, I like to include things like the author. So that would be your name, and I'm going to include the project, which in this case is Nessie. We'll just say Find the Truth. I like to put a version number, and this is something that I can update on a regular basis. So whenever I make changes to my site, I can update the version. That way, if someone else is working on the project, they'll know right away what the current version is. So in this case, we're going to make modifications to this CSS file. I would have considered that version 1.0, and the modifications that we're making are going to be more organizational. We're not making huge structural changes to the page, so I'm just going to call this version 1.1. I like to have a last updated section, and I would just put the date that I was making the changes, and then you might have some other notes that you want. So this would just contain any additional information that you might want to include about the site. You may or may not have that, but that's optional. You could certainly include that if you wanted to. So again, this just is like a nice way that you can call out these areas of your site. And then once I have the project details, I like to kind of separate this area with just some dashes or something other than asterisks. And then I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to set up my color guide. And I find it really helpful to have an area that will specify all of the colors that are being used inside my site, because a lot of times when you're working on a website and you'll start to find these hex values and you're like, what is 155967? Now it just so happens that I'm using brackets, and when I hover over it'll show me what that color looks like, but not all applications do that. So what I've found is that I like to kind of make a area that describes what those colors are. So I have some colors that I would consider kind of more funky hex values. I mean, you might know some of them like 000 and FFF are certainly white and black, but the other ones are things that I might not know off the top of my head. So in the color guide area, I'm going to specify all the colors that are being used in my project. And what I like to do here is I like to just outline the name of the color, and then I'll put in parentheses what that color is being used for, and then I'll put the hex value or the RGBA value or whatever color I'm using. So the first one I want to identify is the nav links is using this light teal color. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to outline that, and then I would just continue that and repeat it for all the colors that I'm using in my site. So here I have this dark teal, which is being used in my footer. I'm also using this color on the body links. So the body links, not the nav links, but the body links are using this darker turquoise color. The body hover is using this green. This really light gray is being used for a section background, and then I have a dirty orange color that I've specified. So any colors that I might want to use in my project, I can list them underneath the color guide. I think I'll just indent this text right here just to make it a little bit easier to see what this information is. Once I've done that, I'm just going to copy my dash spacers that I have here, and we're going to change this to say typography guide. And in the typography guide, I'm going to go through my page and I'm just going to specify, here's my H1, it's using this Lolita 1, and the H2 is using Lolita 1, and then the body is using Maven Pro. So I'm going to identify up here all the different type and font faces that I'm using on my website. So I would list those here. So I'm just going to go ahead and put headings are using Lolita 1. The body is using Maven Pro. Quotes, I might use Georgia and it's going to be italic. You can write other things here too, like if you wanted to specify the size of your headings, the size of the body text. Whatever you find helpful can go in this area. But this is awesome because right away, right at the beginning part of the project, you kind of get an overview of what these things are. So even if I'm not familiar with the project, I know right away that, oh, the body hover is using this shade of green or whatever. If there's something that I want to change on the site, this will just help me to be certain that I'm being consistent with my application of the various colors. So including the project details is really helpful. And some times when you're building websites, like if you're building websites for a content management system, you have to have some contents that go at the top of the CSS file. They're not necessarily called project details, but WordPress forces you to include this sorts of information. So I just find it helpful. And then, if you don't find it helpful, you just delete this information. It doesn't have to be on your page, but you might find that this is something that is great and it just makes your life a little bit easier. So all of these things that I'm showing you are just ways that we can improve what's going on our web page and improve the fact that you or someone else can understand all the various elements. All right, now that we have all of these things outlined, we're ready to start reorganizing the site. That'll happen next.